The spring window of the transfer portal is closed, so how many scholarships does Florida State have to work with? We're going to give you a number at the end of this video. Alongside Ira Schoffel, the managing editor of Warchant.com, my name is Tom Lang, and today on Warchant TV, scholarship count. We are making our projections. Ira, this seems like it should be a very simple exercise. Florida State has 85 spots to use on its roster, and you've got a roster that you can go find and take a look at, and it should be just simple math, right? Why is it not as easy as just looking at names and counting numbers?
Yeah, we always try to be careful with it because there are some variables at play. Some guys that I think there have been guys in the past that people assumed were not on scholarship, and they actually were. Sometimes there's been guys who we thought were on scholarship and they actually weren't. And we've seen that in multiple sports. You see, Leonard Hamilton famously says, "Don't count my scholarships," because there's things you can do. Like if you were a student in the state of Florida, if you've got kids that are going to try to go to college, there are a lot of things they can do to help kids financially. Either if you've got need, there can be Pell Grants and different grants and student loans. And then obviously, if you're academically a strong student, there are scholarship packages available. So, and Florida State's really active with preferred walk-ons. I did a story a couple months ago or a month or two ago, about how many preferred walk-ons actually turned down scholarship offers to other schools to come be preferred walk-ons at Florida State. One of those guys, I think we'll probably talk about when we talk about defensive ends. And so there's always some fluctuation there. And, the coaches can be liberal sometimes with who's on scholarship and who's not. And so we do feel like, by looking at last year's roster breakdown and looking at this year's, I think we feel pretty good about the number we have. But again, we always offer a little caveat that there could be one player that's on scholarship that we don't know is on scholarship.
Yeah, it makes total sense to me. I was fortunate enough to have some bright futures assistants when I went to school in the state of Florida. Never thought about it applying to football, but makes logical sense. If you can save a scholarly and do it that way, why not? Okay, so let's take a look position by position. You can find a full breakdown on warchant.com. Ira goes through the numbers at each position, and then we arrive to the final number, which we'll get to at the end of the video. But to the quarterbacks, Ira first. This one is a pretty standard. All these guys were on campus in spring, and these are guys that we documented pretty top to bottom, starting with Jordan Travis as the starter, right? No surprises here?
Yeah, and definitely no need. And in fact, they actually only had one scholarship. They had one less scholarship quarterback last year.
Yep.
4 is plenty. So, yeah, you're not looking to add anything for sure.
Okay, at running back, now this is interesting. This is where one of those implications and those nuances you talked about comes to bear. You've got 5. Florida State is allowing for 5 scholarship running backs. Trey Benson, Toafili, Keziah Holmes, Rodney Hill, Sam Singleton, the freshman, coming in, but CJ Campbell is not on that list. So this is one of those places, right?
Yeah, and some people have wondered if he's on scholarship. Last year he played a good bit when he was healthy. But from everything I've been told, he's on an academic scholarship. He's a real strong student. I think he was over 4.0 coming out of high school. And so that's a situation where other schools offered him scholarships. But I think the fact that he was an in-state student, great academic student, they were able to get him in on an academic scholarship and not have to count that 85.
Makes total sense. At receiver, we've got a couple of things moving here. One that has been a favorite of the Warchant community, be it on the boards or Warchant TV chat. Questions about a certain receiver. But, Ira, right now it's 10 or 11. Why is it 10 or 11? Please illuminate us. We'll probably put this in the title of the video somewhere.
I think, if you talk to Florida State's coaching staff, I think they would probably tell you it's 11, that they're expecting Goldie Lawrence and Destin Hill to arrive as freshmen this summer. The other 2 freshman receivers, Hakeem Williams and Vandrevis Jacobs, participated in the spring. So you'd have 4 freshmen coming in. Of course, Destin Hill was a 2021 signee. And the reason I'm still leaving him as 10 or 11 is because we have to see it. Destin Hill signed in 2021. We were told he was going to come that fall. Then we were told he was going to come that January. Then we were told he was going to come the next summer. Then he would maybe come the next January. And now we're being told he's going to be here this summer, taking classes. We'll be on the roster this fall. I believe you guys, but I'm not putting it in print until we see him because we've been burned before.
Good luck to Director Ben finding some active and recent B-roll of Destin Hill to put over this video when we're discussing that. But Ira, also some guys that Florida State lost: Malik McClain, Micah Pittman, Keyshawn Helton, Pokey Wilson up to the next level. So this is potentially a spot where Florida State could use one of those vacant schollies to fill out the roster and maybe help out at receiver.
Yeah, and if you just look at the raw numbers, last year they carried 11 wide receivers. If Destin Hill is actually here and plays, then you have 11 wide receivers. So it's not necessarily like you're short on numbers, but as you said, you lost Micah Pittman, who was a starter. Malik McLean has been a part-time starter the last 2 years, and a lot of those guys, as I said, 4 of those receivers are freshmen. 2 of them went through the spring, but 4 are freshmen. So you don't have a ton of experience, and there's some question marks. Winston Wright still coming back from that injury. Darian Williamson missed the spring game. So because of that, I think they'd like to get another receiver. And I think you're going to talk about it in another video
Yes.
on the channel as well about some of the targets, and that also makes it appealing. If there were no really good targets out there at wide receiver, then maybe you just kind of stand pat with what you've got. But there are some pretty high profile wide receivers in the portal that Florida State likely thinks they have a chance at.
We go now to the tight ends, and Florida State, again, 6 guys on scholarship. You're going to notice that there is a name that has been in the rotation seemingly for 5 or 6 years, and Preston Daniel not listed there. But we know about Marqueston Douglas, who's the holdover from last year and a very good player, had a good second half. Jaheim Bell, Kyle Morlock, the 2 high-profile transfers. Then Jackson West, Brian Courtney, Jarrell Powers. These are all names we know. Preston Daniel, another situation similar to C.J. Campbell, Ira?
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, and Preston Daniels one we've always wondered about because he came in as a preferred walk-on when this coaching staff got here. He's a Memphis area kind of kid. They knew him. They brought him in. He has played a ton, as you said. I mean, he's played a ton of football over the last 3 or 4 years. And that's always one of the tricky things about whether somebody's on scholarship or not. And I think why a lot of times coaching staffs don't want to divulge that information because there's a perceived, value to a scholarship versus not being on scholarship. My guess is Preston Daniel is not undergoing a financial hardship to play at Florida State. I'm guessing he's got either scholarships or awards to help him take care of it. Otherwise, he'd probably go somewhere else where he could be on scholarship if it was a need issue. But going back and looking at last year's roster and kind of breaking it down, I don't see how he could have been on scholarship last year. So I don't think he is. Now, he and Dante Anderson, who we'll mention later, and maybe even C.J. Campbell, like those guys who have been walk-ons, they could always get put on scholarship later. If a scholarship becomes available, if there's attrition this offseason, we're going by the numbers as they stand right now, May 2nd, 2023. If a guy leaves the team this summer or academic issues or whatever, that could open up spots. So this is all fluid. But as of right now, yeah, I think Preston's probably still a walk-on.
Way to put a timestamp on that, Ira. These things are very fluid, so I appreciate that you did that because who knows, in a week this could be completely different based upon some attrition issues. Offensive line, there's really no need for anything to be added. And can we just stop and applaud for that? What a situation that we're in. Look at these names, Ira. I don't see a whole lot of what the heck is this guy doing on this list. 17 guys. Andre Otto coming in. He's an interesting prospect, potential tackle in the future for Florida State. But look at the depth here. They can run a lot of drills and practice concurrently with these types of players. What a difference a couple of years makes.
Yeah, and even from last year, because like as you said, I think last year I think they had 18 scholarship offensive linemen. Right now they're looking at 17, including the freshman that's coming in. And you'd say, okay, well you're down one, but really there were a few guys in that group that you knew probably were never going to play at Florida State, like not meaningful snaps. The group you have before you, Tom Lang, I could see all those guys playing for Florida State. I mean, there's 1 or 2 maybe that you think are long shots, but for the most part, man, there's a reason we were so excited when you saw the 3 deep at practice when they had 3 full offensive lines and a couple other guys left over. It's legit, man. That's an awesome room.
It's one of my favorite lists I've ever seen. Just look at that. That is, wow, amazing.
You should juxtapose it to maybe the list of scholarship linemen 4 years ago.
No, thank you. I'm trying to stay happy. I might just screenshot this and make it the background of my Twitter. I'm going to do the background image. So, all right, in all for the offense, that adds up to how many scholarships? I don't know, but we're going to get you the total number at the end of the video. If you did the quick math, good for you. On the D-line, Ira, here we go. 16 scholarships allocated. Last year they had 18. So is this a red flag Florida State could be adding on the D-line?
Yeah, and to follow up on something we talked about earlier, I mentioned Dante Anderson. He's the one guy that we don't. Not sorry to jump ahead on you there, Tom, but he's one guy I don't have listed, and he's one I've always been unsure about. We were told when he signed with Florida State that he was a preferred walk-on, but then they announced him as part of the signing class. So I kind of wondered, okay, maybe a scholarship became available, maybe it's a fluid situation. Again, going back and looking at last year's roster, the 85 that started last season, I feel like he's probably not on scholarship. there's a possibility, though. I always leave a little bit of window.
Yeah.
There were a couple other guys that transferred in last year from the state of Florida that theoretically maybe they were in-state students and they were not on scholarship, and maybe he was. Jarquez McClellan is an example. But as of right now, I would say Dante Anderson probably is not on scholarship. So it basically gives you an extra body there. You feel like is a scholarship level player. He had offers from Power 5 schools coming out of high school. I definitely think there's a need there. Defensive end. It's not I don't know that it's the most urgent need in the world. You talked about this on the Monday Smash. I thought was a great point that several of those guys that when you look at that list, several of those guys we would classify as defensive tackles. Braden Fisk, even Daryl Jackson, Josh Farmer, Dennis Briggs. Dennis Briggs a lot of those guys have played defensive end in the past, could play defensive end this season. Adam Fuller has said he might put 4 interior linemen out there together at times. So I don't know that it's an urgent need for a defensive end, but I think if they can get a defensive end, they probably would, because you really only have 3 proven pass rushers. Jared Verse, Patrick Payton, and Gilbert Edmond.
And again, just comparing to last year, it's a 2-player difference, assuming that Dante Anderson is not on Scully. So one would think if that's the ideal way you want to count your numbers, then Florida State could dip in, spend one of those extra spots on a defensive lineman. At linebacker, 7 scholarships allocated. Last year's number was 7. That includes star freshman Blake Nicholson, another freshman, and Dylan Brown Turner coming to campus this summer, enrolling in the summer. And then at the top, Ira, there's a lot of experience at the top of this depth chart, but it's not a whole ton. Brendan Gant leaving and transferring to Colorado in certain situations could prove to be a bit of a hole in the lineup. What do you think here? Do they stand pat? And is 7 going to be the number as Florida State gets into fall camp?
Yeah, and they also lost, and it's a couple of months back, but Amari Gaynor is a former starter linebacker, and also Stephen Dix was a former starter. Now, I don't know that Stephen Dix was going to factor largely into their plans this year, but you did have 3 other experienced linebackers that are no longer here. You replaced them ostensibly with 3 true freshmen. DeMarco Ward was in here in the spring. Pretty impressive spring for a guy that there weren't a lot of expectations about. So maybe he can work his way into the rotation. And then, as you said, Blake Nicholson of the other 2 comes in with much more hype and acclaim, a 4-star prospect out of California. But he won't be here till this summer. He and Dylan Brown Turner will be here this summer. And so when they get to full camp, that'll be the first time they really go through Florida State practices. So I think you'd like to get one more linebacker. I don't think the 2 deep is terrible when you look at those first 4 names on that list. But I think if they can get another linebacker, I think they will. I don't know that you would do it just to get a body, though. I think it would have to be, and I think Michael Langston has talked about some on our message boards, the thinking he believes, and I think this is probably true, is they're probably more inclined to maybe get a promising, maybe a second-year linebacker out of the portal, second or third year, somebody with some tread in the tires, not somebody that you're bringing in just for 1 year, because you already have returning starters in Kalen DeLoach and Tatum Bethune.
Makes sense to me. And you know what? We talked about it on the Smash, and DeMarco Ward's name did not come up, and that's bad. He did have a good spring camp. Omar Graham is somebody the coaching staff pushed before spring started, and I thought he had a decent camp, pretty solid towards the end, in fact. But DeMarco Ward, Ira, stood out at more than a few days of practice where you had to check. I mean, personally, I had to check the roster and say, we had DeMarco Ward. Okay. All right. I see you, DeMarco Ward. Yeah. So there it is, 7 scholars for the FSU Seminoles when it comes to the linebacker position. And now we get to defensive back. This is a place that we're going to be talking about an awful lot on warchant.com, Warchant TV over the next few weeks. There is going to be a subsequent video about who is Florida State targeting in the defensive backfield, specifically safety. You could see it there, Ira, in your listing. 13 scholars allocated for this year, 15 last year, would seem to suggest that Florida State would go defensive back hunting in the portal.
Yeah, I mean, they had so many defensive backs leave since last season. On that list of 22 that they've lost since the Florida game last year, I think 6 of them maybe are defensive backs, 6 or 7 are defensive backs. So they've lost a lot of defensive backs from this roster, and a lot of them are guys that played. And I think the most immediate need we all know is at safety, where there was probably already a need for another safety in the portal, but now it's becoming an urgent need. Like this is DEFCON 5, I think, for Florida State's coaching staff to go get a safety, because you just lost your 2 most experienced backups, Travis Jay and Amari and Duke Cooper, who were not super experienced backups necessarily, or guys you definitely knew were going to be able to play at a high level behind Shaheem Brown and Akeem Dent, but they were veteran players that played a lot of college football, and now they're both in the portal. And so, they desperately need at least one safety, possibly two. I mean, if you've got 4 spots available, I don't know that you put 2 of them on safeties, but I wouldn't say you don't. I mean, I think it's a possibility. Part of it also will depend on, there's a lot of versatility in that list of DBs where guys who play corner who could potentially play safety.
There's the tease right there. If you did the quick math and you know the numbers, you know what we're about to say. What is the
Right.
final count, Ira, when it comes to Florida State scholarships? This is an unofficial projection from Warchant.com, but I trust Ira over here on the right of the screen. If you had to say Florida State has blank number of scholarships, what do you think they're working with right now?
I think it's 80 to 81, and Destin Hill's the magic number. And if he shows up, Destin, we're waiting on you, buddy. If you show up this weekend or early next week for summer classes, then that puts them at 81. Otherwise, they're at 80. And so they got 4 spots to work with. I think, we think that they'll allocate those to a few positions, starting at safety, and then a couple of the other ones we talked about. But they also, could reward a guy that's not on scholarship, as we said, Preston Daniel, Dante Anderson, CJ Campbell. Again, because he's such a strong academic scholarship student, I don't know that that's the priority, but you might also want to do it just to reward him. So they've got some numbers to play with. But I think based on what this team has, the goals they have, the potential this team has, you think there's probably going to use those 4 scholarships on guys that you can bring into the program.
So there you go, around a handful, depending upon Destin Hill. If he exists, and he exists in Tallahassee, and he exists at Florida State enrolled in classes, then it's more likely 4. But Florida State has enough room to build and fortify the roster in a couple positions of need. We're going to talk about that in a little bit in a subsequent video of, okay, if you got 4 or 5 spaces, who are you going after? Look for that on Warchant TV. Subscribe to the channel. Absolutely free. That'll help you find it on your home screen. You'll do less clicking and less having to find what we do. It'll just be right there before you. And if you feel like you were smarter after this video, then head over to warchant.com. We showed you the article top to bottom, but we have a lot of content like that on warchant.com, and you can see at the bottom of the screen for just $29.99, you'll be covered all the way through fall camp. That is a really good deal, and you will be a better, more prepared Florida State Seminoles fan for going to warchant.com. So that's it for right now. 80 or 81 is the magic number. We'll see what Florida State does with that, and we'll have more for you on Warchant TV. He's Ira. I'm Tom. We'll talk to you next time.